Unless you're a contractor, you're probably not going to carry around a toolbox everywhere you go just to handle those everyday emergencies that require a tool. That's where the multi-tool comes in. These days on the market, there's a bunch of different shapes, sizes, and kinds of multi-tool. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Victorinox Swisscard Lite. With this tool, there's a number of pluses and one, I think, really big minus. You're going to want to know about all of it before you make the purchase if you're thinking about this as an everyday carry kind of tool. So let's get going. The Swisscard Lite is a credit card size companion for your wallet or purse or perhaps the visor of your vehicle. It's a multi-tool that, according to the maker, has 13 different functions. It is made by Victorinox, which is the company that makes the Swiss Army knife. Accordingly, each of those 13 tools is fairly reminiscent of a Swiss Army knife. The card itself is 3.2 inches long, which is just shorter than a credit card, and it is the thickness of approximately 3 credit cards. Because it's so thick, they made it a little shorter. That way it can fit into a pouch that would normally hold the average credit card. It's very lightweight, it weighs about 0.9 ounces. It comes in a couple of different colors and designs. This one happens to be the translucent red one, which is sort of the normal color, I guess. And it costs about $40 US or $60 in Canada. That puts it price-wise on par with a lot of mid-level Swiss Army knives. So if you're looking at this, you're probably considering a lot of other multi-tools. Today we'll go over each of the features and hopefully make it clear whether or not it's a useful tool for you to carry or whether or not you should pass and go with something else. So let's dive a little deeper. Victorinox advertises this tool as having 13 functions. There's a blade, there's a pen, there are tweezers, there's one pin, there's 2 rulers, there's a magnifying glass, there's scissors, there's an LED light, and then there's what they call the Quattro screwdriver, which comprises 4 of the 13 features. There's 2 Phillips head screwdrivers and 2 flathead screwdrivers built into it. More on that in a moment. The minute you pick it up, it's apparent the build quality is really good. This is the kind of thing that consumers have come to expect from Victorinox. If you've ever owned a Swiss Army knife, you'll know they're pretty durable. The Swisscard Lite feels exactly like that in your hand. It's a solid piece of ABS plastic, and each of the tools, though they slide out, detent into position quite well. It doesn't feel like they're gonna slide out or fall out in your pocket. Generally speaking, it's a tool that inspires some confidence. So first off, the scissors. Victorinox scissors are famous. They feel really good in your hand. If you've ever tried the scissors on a Victorinox Swiss Army knife, you'll know they just work. They stay sharp, the spring is usually pretty good, and the scissors on the Swisscard Lite are not an exception to this rule. The spring is solid, they cut well. Because it's not attached to a knife, like the scissors on a Swiss Army knife, they added a loop so that you can put a finger through it so you can hold it while you're using it. These scissors do cut. You can see here they're cutting through a piece of number 8 sash cord that's a 1/4 inch thick. It takes a little twisting, but the scissors are able to handle that well. They cut paper reasonably well, and you can use them for everyday tasks like cutting zip ties off of things you buy. Effectively, these are small, useful, solid scissors. So the blade that comes with it is another thing people talk about. It does have a bit of a bend to it, but it's very, very sharp. The detent that holds it into the card is solid enough. I've owned this card for about 5 years at this point. The blade has never slid out on its own. The detent holds it in place. That's a good feature. The blade's not very big, and you might wonder what uses other than opening a letter you might find for it. But over the years, I've found it to be pretty useful. Here, just like the scissors, you can see it's cutting through a piece of number 8 sash cord, which is a 1/4 inch thick. It takes a little work in, but it will cut through it no problem. One interesting trick, you can pull the blade out, flip it around, slide it back into the card. It provides a little more torque, and though the detent doesn't hold the blade in place, it's reasonably easy to hold it in the card with your finger while you slice. It's one way to get a slightly larger handle on what is a very small tool. On the whole, I find the blade pretty useful. Next up, moving around the tool, is the 4-bladed screwdriver. It's not exactly massive. You're gonna look at it and say it's the size of a washer. How am I ever gonna use that? But the fact is, you actually can use it. There's 2 Phillips screwdrivers on it and 2 flathead screwdrivers. As you can see here, though there is a pilot hole in this piece of wood, the screwdriver is capable of putting an 1.5-inch drywall screw into a 2x4. But then, as soon as I finished this demonstration, I was so pleased with myself having driven a whole screw in with a screwdriver the size of a washer that I let my hand fall. The little tool clipped the edge of the table. The tool fell down into my deck, slid between the cracks, and I haven't seen it since. So you might say you should be more careful with your tools. That is true. But while I'm on it, that is probably the biggest drawback with this particular tool as an everyday carry. Everything in it is small and detachable. So that means in a pinch, you can lose it. If you drop your Swiss Army knife or Leatherman, you're gonna bend down and pick that thing up. If you drop a screwdriver that's the size of a washer, it's very possible you won't find it again. And that sort of negates the whole idea of having something at the ready in case you need it. If I had one major criticism of this tool, that would be it. Small components that are not attached and that can be lost easily. So next up on the card, there are the tweezers. The tweezers are short and a little bit fat. You can use the corner. If you had a sliver, you could probably get a sliver out with it. In a pinch, it would be useful, I think, for threading a sewing machine. But beyond that, there's no surprises. They're exactly what you would expect from a Victorinox set of tweezers. They added a pin to this, which is, I think, a big bonus over the toothpick. The toothpick, I don't know about. You find toothpicks on Swiss Army knives all the time, but I find it's the tool that I use the least. Why might you use a pin? If on your vehicle, your windshield wiper fluid nozzle gets clogged, which they often do, having a pin handy is a great way in a pinch to stick it in there, open up the clog, and let out your windshield wiper fluid again. That for me is a plus. It certainly is better than a toothpick, I think. One of the more surprisingly useful tools on this is the pen. It's a pressurized pen that writes on all sorts of surfaces. It writes on paper, of course, pretty well, but it also writes on wood, and it'll even put a mark on metal. And then there are two features that are built into the body of the card. There's the 5x magnifying glass, which it's made of plastic, but it does work. I suppose if you're trying to read the fine print on a prescription, something like that, it might be useful. And then lastly, there's the light. It's an LED light. Originally, the very first iteration of this card, made in 2003, had a red light. Now the light is white. It's much more useful. It's just not that bright. You can see it shining here right at the lens. It's not exactly blinding. However, it is a light. It does work better than no light. And it's pretty easy to use. The switch does not get weak with use. Forward, back, it always works. And then the whole switch pulls out of the card in order to change the battery. The battery is pretty easy to change. I found that the CR1025 button cells that it takes are actually kind of hard to find. They are available online. It's much easier to find those there than in your average store, even if they sell hearing aid batteries or watch batteries. And not to forget the rulers. You get 3 inches of ruler on the back and approximately 7 centimeters on the front. The centimeter side, because of the way the bevel works, I found to be more useful than the inches side. I guess that's because it's a European-made product. It is kind of handy to have a straight edge around, just sitting there in your pocket in case you need to mark something. In the end, this is a huge design achievement for Victorinox. It's a beautiful, beautiful product. I love how you can see the tools inside when they're inserted through the translucent plastic of the card. I love how the tools feel going in and coming out. I love that even after years of use, the tools don't get loose and pop out. And generally speaking, if you're gonna make a credit card size multi-tool, you probably wanna make something like this. It's hardy, it's strong, and it's well thought out. That's how it wins awards. The problem is, maybe we all should not be carrying a credit card size multi-tool. There isn't really a great way to design a tool like this where the tools aren't really small. For my money, if you're gonna spend $40 US on something, there's a number of Swiss Army knives you could be looking at that might be more useful. So that's what I'm planning on checking out in next Saturday's video. If you've ever used a Swisscard and have an opinion, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section below. If you use a different multi-tool, I'd like to hear about that too. Otherwise, stay safe, have fun with your DIY projects, and I'll see you next Saturday.